never ever trust your family. Okay, you are alone in this game. Okay, your family is going to be overcommitting themselves when they promise anything, just because they are extremely emotional. They are not rational when they are committing. Okay, and if you do that, then it's going to fire back. So one piece of advice would be, you are alone in this game. Don't count on anyone. Just think that nobody is there to help you. If you plan that way, then you will go a long way.
Hey everyone, this is Devin Miller here with another episode of the Inventive Journey. I'm your host, Devin Miller, the serial entrepreneur that's grown several startups into 7- and 8-figure businesses, as well as the founder and CEO of Miller IP Law, where we help startups and small businesses with their patents and trademarks. If you ever need help with yours, just go to strategymeeting.com, and we're always here to help. Now, today we have another great guest on the podcast, Sam Gupta, and give you a quick introduction to Sam. So he came from a business or a family that was always or did their own business. So he started at the younger age of 8 years old, helping out with the family business, everything from money and finance and kind of everything in between, and doing tables and whatever else it was, but doing a family business. And then went off and got a degree at in engineering at the university. Had an entrepreneur desire, but also needed to support the family. So worked for a big business alongside pursuing his own business for a period of time. Did consulting for the big businesses. Still wanted to do his own entrepreneur journey, so started to start something on his own. And in around 2011, 2012, started to explore startups. Failed on a few different, trying to get startups up and going. Decided to focus on the core of skills for a startup, and that led to starting up his own business and a couple different brands. More recently. So with that much as an introduction, welcome on the podcast, Sam.
Hey, thank you so much for having me. Super excited to be here. Super excited to talk to your fun listeners.
Absolutely. So I just gave a quick run through of a much longer journey. So take us back in time a bit to when you were a much younger kid and you were working on or helping out with the family business, and how your journey started from there.
Oh my goodness, it was so much fun. And I always talk about my first job on a lot of different podcasts. And I think this is going to be my, I guess, 19th, 20th podcast that I have appeared on. So super popular guy in the podcasting community. So my first job was, since I come from the manufacturing and distribution background, right? So in my family, they have a saying that if you cannot be on the shop floor, and typically in the manufacturing and distribution business, you are going to have some sort of warehouse or the manufacturing shop floor where you are going to be doing a lot of physical job, which a 5-year, 6-year-old kid cannot do. But then back in the days, we used to count money because we didn't have any electronic form of payment, right? We didn't have credit cards. So we had piles of cash and somebody had to count those. So that was sort of my first job. And that was my sort of the entrepreneurial background. That's how we started, right? So when you grow up in the family business, you learn a lot of different skills. And I think we discussed this in the pre-show as well, that by the time I went to university, I just knew about the manufacturing, the accounting, everything that you can possibly imagine from the retail, distribution, and manufacturing perspective, also from the finance perspective. But then what I really wanted to do as any teenager, right? So I really wanted to run away from my family because I didn't appreciate what they did. I was like, I was smarter than them. So I actually went after the software degree or the electronics engineering is how I like to define, but I had deep interest in the software side of things. So did a lot of things while I was in the university in building a startup, but then again, I could not see feeding my family using that, just because the customers, the kind of customers we had, they never paid enough, to be honest. And we had to do a lot to please them, right? So it was just hard. So then I decided to go for Fortune 500 consulting, as you mentioned. So did that for roughly 10-ish years. And
one question I had is, because I mean, you portrayed, or you're saying, hey, I really had this entrepreneur desire, but also want to support the family, and Fortune 500s pay better than startups, or at least maybe to start out with, or it's easier to get going. So how did you come to that conclusion? I mean, was it just simply, hey, I've got financial obligations. If I do a startup, I'm not going to be able to support them, or was it a back and forth, or did you try startups, or did you just go directly to Fortune 5? How did you make that decision? Because it's kind of one that a lot of people bump into.
Yeah, so in my case, I think just because of my business background, I sort of have this intuition when I know that this is not going to be a long-term thing. Okay, so in my case, I mean, I was sort of born to do the projections in terms of cash, in terms of sustainability of the business. So I am not going to be excited about if somebody is paying, let's say, $100 a month or $200 a month, and just because I have a startup, I'm not going to be excited that oh my goodness, I mean, I have some traction here. That's not who I was. I mean, I knew that, I mean, that small money, I will not be able to grow my family. I'll not be able to, or I will not be able to hire anybody. So that was not really scalable, right? So I figured that I had some gaps overall in understanding, overall in building the startups or business, even though I came from business background, but software is a completely different business, man. I mean, every business is different. Every situation is different. Every customer group is different. Every country is different. Every product is different. Every offering is different. So just because you come from the, let's say, the manufacturing or distribution background does not mean that you can build a software company. So I had to learn it hard way, right? So okay, so since I was now hanging in the middle, so I came from my manufacturing, distribution, accounting background, but then I am actually going after the software. So I had to figure out, okay, so I have done, let's say, 3 or 4 years of software, and then I had done a lot of manufacturing distributions. What do I do now? Do I go for software, or do I go back to my retail manufacturing? So I decided, you know what? Since I started on the software journey, let me continue on that at least. Okay, just to build sort of the understanding in terms of how to work in this field. So that's why I started just exploring that path as opposed to going for something else. So that's why I went for the Fortune 500 consulting, just because of the kind of money and the backing and the learning that I needed at that stage of my life. But that entrepreneurial itch was always there with me. So I was always trying these side hustles. But again, I could never see them scaling. I could never see them a viable business, which is going to be very key in case of any startup. And I see, let's say, 60%, 70% of these startups. I mean, I don't see them as the viable business, to be honest. Okay. And I'm going to be completely upfront here. And that's why, as you may have heard or seen, that 90% of these startups they never become successful, right? And that's true as well. Just because you have very tiny traction in the beginning, that does not mean that you are probably going to be a real business. Real business requires a lot more persistence, a lot more financial backing. Somebody should be able to back you up, as opposed to simply going after an idea and I don't know whether that is going to work in the real world or not, right? So that's why I really wanted to get into deeper in terms of how to build a software business. So that's why I stayed in the consulting space for roughly 10, 12 years. But still, for me, it was very hard to visualize whether I can build a software business or not, because I had seen how challenging a software business could be. And in the enterprise consulting space, again, the enterprise space is going to be very different than your product space, right? So in the startup space, you are going to see a lot more companies. They are going to go after, let's say, the SaaS product or the smaller product, which are going after SMB. But the consulting that I was doing was really in the Fortune 500 space, really in the enterprise space.
So now let me dive in and ask. So, you're doing the consulting, you do it for, I think you said 12, 15 years or somewhere around there.
Yeah.
Now, what was kind of the tipping point to say, okay, I've done this for a period of time? Because, consulting, doing it for big companies probably pays decently. And, you built up your reputation and clientele, you built up, kind of that, track record. What made you decide to then jump over and start doing your own startup, or what was kind of that tipping point?
So yeah, I always wanted to do that, but I needed that financial backing, and it does take a long time to be able to have that financial backing to be able to start comfortably, and that's why it took some time for me. And for also I wanted to learn. I mean, I'm never afraid of learning. I don't want to jump into something when I don't necessarily understand how to build this business, right? So it took some time to be able to learn the industry, how what different roles are going to be there in terms of what people do in different roles, how to build different functions. Again, a business requires a lot more than just starting a business. So that's why it did take for me that 10-15 years, but by that time I had decent financial backing, to be honest. And I was married by then. Again, a lot of people are going to think, you know what, let me start business first and then I'll figure out, whether I want to get married or not. In my case, I actually wanted to do everything else in terms of the having the stable life before I took any risk. It's the opposite, but I did it, right?
Hey,
But
definitely works out. So now follow up to that. So I mean,
yeah.
was there a specific tipping point? In other words, yeah. So you get married, you do the other things, you get the financial backing, you have the money, and or at least the ability to have some savings, and you're not putting all of your life at risk, so to speak. But what was a tipping point, or when you say, okay, I've done enough, I've saved enough, I'm ready to go, let's try this out. And and then once you hit that tipping point, how did you decide what you wanted to do or what you were going to land on?
So in my case, obviously I was trying these things part-time always, right? So even after trying the consulting for 10-15 years, I was building startups in parallel, always working on that, right? So I would not say that I started full time. Even after 10-12 years, I was still working full time and trying something in parallel. That's what I was doing. So I don't know where that tipping point is going to be. I think the tipping point is going to be once I figured out, what, now I need to move, in full-time capacity. I think that would be a tipping point in my opinion. But before that, I think there is a story, and that is that we need to dig into, because that's where I learned a lot from the entrepreneurial journey, right? So when I was doing all of those startups, as I had told you in the pre-show, I was going after every shiny object out there. So I tried to build a startup in the medical device space, and you are in the legal, community, and you know how difficult it is to build a startup in the medical device. And I had zero expertise in that space. But you know what? That's what everybody does, right? I mean, when they are new in the field, they want to run after every shiny object. So I tried into the medical device space. I tried into martech, fintech, real estate, you name it. I mean, you name an industry, and I would have probably tried a startup there. But again, failed every time. So I guess the tipping point was for me was to find a focus, okay, to find that core. When I figured, okay, you know what, I have tried all of this. Now I understand how to sort of build that sales and marketing funnel that is going to give us the continuous revenue. So I had to reflect on my journey, starting from my journey from back in the days when I was doing, let's say, manufacturing distribution. I was like, I've done ERP, I've done manufacturing. And so what is the common pattern? What is my core focus? What are my core values? What am I built of? Okay. And that's when I realized, you know what, I really understood ERP so well, right? And that's where, we started focusing a lot more. And this whole startup journey that I did in between, that gave me an understanding of how to build that sales and marketing funnel that I did not have as part of my consulting journey. As part of consulting journey, I got a lot of subject matter expertise, but I did not have the overall understanding of how to build a startup. So back in somewhere in 2016, 2017 is when we started focusing a lot more on Elevate IQ. We built a business around, ERP, as you know, that's the space that we are in. And we started focusing on really core, really niching down, really focusing on the things that we were really good at.
No, that definitely makes sense. And, I like it's never just I think it's hard to say there's one tipping point. I think that you start out and, okay, I'm going to try this. I might do this as a side hustle. I might try this out for a period of time, see how it goes. Is it worthwhile? Can I do this? And then you learn some skills. You probably have some failures. You pick up some more skills along the way, and you continue to have that kind of full-time job as you figuring out what you want to do as a startup, rather than just, some people will just dive in, and sometimes it works out for them, but some people will dive in, they'll say, hey, I don't really know what I'm going to do, but I'm going to try it anyway. And, and then they ping pong between a whole bunch, and then they end the day, they now we're in a precarious financial position. They still haven't figured it out, and they're still doing it. So I think that there's a lot to be said for going down that path. So now you went down that path. You've been doing that for a few years now. How has it gone? Has it been successful, rewarding? Have you wish you started earlier? You wish you could go back, or kind of how's that all gone for you?
Well, it's gone really well. Obviously, COVID has been a crazy situation for all of us. I don't think anybody was really prepared for COVID because we have not experienced this before. But overall, I think it's gone pretty well. To be honest, right now the position that we are in overall from our positioning, branding, marketing, and overall visibility in the market, overall trust, I would say, from the customer perspective. I think we are in a very good position despite COVID.
Hmm. No, I think that definitely, that's always, there's always things that you have to pivot and adjust to. And COVID was certainly one for a lot of businesses, but as you figure it out, as you adapt, and as you move forward, I think it still presents a lot of opportunities. So it sounds like you guys have continued to make your way forward on that. So now as we jump, now as you're looking kind of into the future, taking, the next 6 to 12 months, where do you see things headed, and where are you guys going to go?
So right now, from the positioning perspective, and let me give a little story in terms of overall journey of the company's wall, in terms of the way we built. So when we started, obviously we wanted to. Our vision was, how can we survive? That's the first thing that, in my opinion, all of the businesses should think of. So initially, when we started, we had, let's say, cash for 12 to 18 months or whatever, and we are a service business. I mean, we are not really investor funded, so we need to be extremely conscious about the cost. And in our case, the labor that we have and the people that we have, they are extremely expensive. We are in the programming space, and as how expensive the consultant or the programmers are going to be. So we need to be extremely sensitive and extremely conscious of our cash position always. So initially, when I started, in fact, I mean, I have a funny story, and maybe that probably is a tipping point, for me, because my wife actually tipped me over, and she was like, you know what, I have started these businesses, and I have done it, and here is my $8,000 that you can take, and you can start this business. And I was like, are you sure about that? And in my case, I always want to look at every idea that anybody may have, and I want to consider them seriously. In my case, I'm more of the execution guy. If you give me a problem, I will take it to the end. That's my strength. Always. Okay. She gave me a problem. Okay. It was a tough time, to be honest. Okay. $8,000 is nothing. I mean, see, nobody should be starting a business in $8,000. The moral of the story is, so we started, we ended up selling our house and that's how we got cash for 12 to 18 months. And that's what I probably had from the beginning in my mind, to be honest. I mean, that's how we wanted to operate, right? So that was kind of the tipping point. But overall, from the journey perspective, what we really wanted to do is how can we be stable from the revenue perspective in, let's say, first couple of years, and after that we can think about building on top of that. So initially, when we were thinking about the sales and marketing spend, right, we were super conscious. Okay, how can we get the first customer? That was always the first priority. How can we get the reliable customer who's always going to pay us, despite of how expensive we are or whatever, right? I mean, see, you need to have that kind of trust with your first customer so that you have the scalable customer model, scalable revenue model, right? So that was our vision from the beginning, and then we actually wanted to build on top of that. So yeah, so when we started doing that, we figured out, okay, what are the channels that are really performing for us? What are the channels that are really bringing the ROI for us? And the ROI needs to be in the micro P&L segments, the way I like to think. Okay, I like to think of my business. I always like to split my business in, let's say, 10 different segments. And out of those 10 different segments, do I have my rough P&L, on the back of my envelope anytime if I want to pull? Okay, and I want to compare, okay, what is working, what is not working. That's how much data I typically like to have on my hands, to be honest. The information I like to have on my hands. So that's why, honestly speaking, that is the reason why we are successful in this market. Otherwise, it would have been harder to survive during COVID. So we have very deep understanding of our customer channels. We have very deep understanding of what works from the sales perspective, from the marketing perspective. So right now, our goal is, I mean, we are getting better. I'm not going to say that, we were this good from day one. We made tons and tons of mistakes, right? But our goal was to understand these micro slices. Okay, how can we understand the potential of those micro slices, and how can we double down on those slices? Okay, so that's what we did. So right now our goal is, how can we be regional brand from the ERP consulting perspective? how can we make sure that at least one division is performing well? And we always like to have at least 2 or 3 divisions in the business. So it's completely diversified. We don't want to put all of money in one customer or one customer segment or one group. So we are always trying to diversify. So in the next 5 to 6 years, I guess, it's going to be a lot more focus. How can we find the channels that we can double down, and how can we find channels that we can explore further? And in terms of the R&D, we typically like to see 80-20, right? 80 is going to be near term, 20 is going to be long term. That's how we like to define our investment. Obviously we are always exploring the channels that are working for us, and we are always looking for how can we keep experimenting on newer channels. We are always trying newer channels from the marketing perspective, from social media, but again, we don't like to put all of money in everything, because that doesn't work, right? Then we can burn ourselves.
No, I think that's a lot of a great place to be and a lot of lessons learned. I'm excited to see now, kind of as you continue to diversify, as you kind of keep those channels open and see what works, where things are headed. So I'm excited to see. So now with that in mind, we'll shift gears just a bit, and kind of as we've reached to where you're at in your journey and a little bit looking into the future, we'll jump to the 2 questions I always have at the end of each podcast. So The first question I always ask is, along your journey, what was the worst business decision you ever made, and what did you learn from it?
So my worst business decision is going to be not trusting the branding and marketing enough. In my business, I always believed that, it was a slightly more sales driven business, and we barely invested anything in marketing. Even if you are talking about free marketing, even if you are talking about investing time, we had zero visibility from the brand perspective, from the marketing perspective. That has been a learning. If we sort of, diversified us a bit and maybe did 70% sales and 30% marketing and branding, just write blogs on a consistent basis, just build your SEO, build your domain authority. That is something we did not do. And we realized that, we should have done that from very beginning, just because, when you look at the outbound, it's all sunk cost in our mind, right? But the inbound marketing is almost your asset. So make sure you are always building the assets from the marketing perspective, because that is going to be long term. Your outbound is all short term. So I would say the worst decision that we have made is going to be not trusting marketing and branding enough.
No, and I think, I think that definitely makes sense. It's one that it's an easy one to make the mistakes, and, who to trust and where to put the money and how to make the decisions is always a hard one. And sometimes you have to learn what you should have trusted or what you should have done by what you didn't do and what you didn't trust. And then you learn your lessons from there. So now, as we jump to the second question I always have, which is, now if you're talking to someone that's just getting into a startup or a small business, what'd be the one piece of advice you'd give them?
So my advice is going to be, and I'm probably going to be called out on this one, never ever trust your family. Okay. You are alone in this game. Okay. Your family is going to be overcommitting themselves when they promise anything, just because they are extremely emotional. They are not rational when they are committing. Okay. And if you do that, then it's going to fire back. So one piece of advice would be, you are alone in this game. Don't count on anyone. Just think that nobody is there to help you. If you plan that way, then you will go a long way. And that's been a hard lesson for me. I'm always like, why are my employees not helping me out? If I have to get revenue, they should be helping me out. But you know what? It doesn't work that way. Okay. I'm the only one who's responsible to do everything. That's how I like to think. And that's why we could survive COVID. Otherwise, by this time, we'll be gone, to be honest. Okay. You are alone in this journey is my piece of advice.
No, I like that, because, if you always, it's a little bit like, if you to go back the old story about Cortez, it was when the Americas were being founded, and, people were coming, and he basically burned the ships, right? He came on the land, he said, hey, and then after everybody got off, he burned the ships and said, there is no way back. We're not going back to Europe. We're going to stay here, and we're going to make this work. And that's what, before that, there had been a lot of failed colonies because they weren't able to do it. And there was a bit of a difference. And when you have the family and, hey, they're going to help me out, or I'm going to rely on them or anything else, then you always feel like you have a safety net, and you probably don't operate you don't operate with the risk adverse. You don't have cash savings because you always think there'll be that safety net. And when you actually look and say, no, I don't have a safety net. I'm the one that's got to get it figured out, got to make it work, got to get it going. And if I don't, then there is, it's going to fail. Then it gives you that sense of urgency, and it also makes you approach it differently. It's kind of like, if you have a whole bunch of, sometimes the worst thing for a business is they have way too much money to spend and they go blow it on a whole bunch of things that they don't need, or they're not as judicious or careful because they have too much money. And so I think that's a great piece of advice. So now as we wrap up, if people want to reach out to, they want to find out more, they want to be a customer, a client, they want to be an investor, an employee, they want to be a next best friend, any or all of the above, what's the best way to reach out or find out more?
Super easy. I'm super popular on LinkedIn, social media, Twitter. You cannot miss me. My first name is Sam, S-A-M. Last name is Gupta, G-U-P-T-A. And if you look up for WBS Rocks, it's WBS ROCKS. If you look up on LinkedIn, you'll find me. And the business URL, if you want, that's going to be wbs.rocks. It's super easy as well. And the Elevate IQ is the name of the business. And the URL is elevateiq.com. There's no E at the end in Elevate word. So it's ELEVATEIQ.com.
All right. Well, I definitely encourage people to reach out, find out more, and support Sam along his journey. Well, thank you again, Sam, for coming on. It's been it's been a pleasure. Now, for all of you that are listeners, if you have your own journey to tell and you want to come on the podcast and be a guest on here, share your journey, just go to inventiveguest.com, apply to be on the podcast. So 2 more things as listener. One, and make sure to click subscribe in your podcast player so you know when all of our awesome episodes come out. And 2, make sure to leave a review so everybody else finds out about our awesome episodes as well. Last but not least, if you ever need help, patents, trademarks, or anything else with your business, just go to strategymeeting.com, and we're always here to help. Thank you again, Sam, and wish the next leg of your journey even better than the last.
Thank you so much. I had a blast here.